you have to get good at like one or two things to be really good at those things. And it seems like in the syndication business, and even on our show, I just hear it time and time again. You need to know the whole business to some extent, but you just can't be good at every part of it. And so I focused on obviously the marketing side, investor relations, and being as good at that as I possibly could. And then started building a team for those other things that I didn't have time to be the best underwriter that I knew I needed to be. I didn't have time to build all the broker relationships while also maintaining all the investor relationships and doing the marketing piece and the daily podcast and still working full time in the beginning as well, in a full-time family. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to be really good at this thing right here. And then I'm going to build that team that are experts in those other fields, right? And that's what we had to do.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else with your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grenzig, and with me, as always, is John Cohen. How's it going, bud?
We are doing good. We are, it's vaccination day for me. So by the time this goes live, I will be partially vaccinated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by the time this goes live, you'll have a third arm like me.
Exactly. I'm a third arm. They'll know everything I'm doing. But inevitably, what we do, I obviously have to go and travel. And because of the restrictions of not being vaccinated, I unfortunately don't have a choice whether you believe in it or not. It is what it is, right? It's life. So it's my day to meet the Reaper, I guess.
Well, it's a good day for it. Well, at least it's good here. I don't know what it's like there, but it's weird. We're starting to get into, I remember all the time, like Lisa and them would always say like, oh, it's rainy season. It rains every freaking day around like 3. It's literally that time. And I'm looking at my weather thing and it's literally just partial rain for the next 10 days out. And I'm like, okay, I guess it's a real thing.
Yeah, we just had a really shitty weekend. It was extremely rainy.
I saw that. Yeah.
Weather, it is what it is, right? Regular New York in June, right? So it's getting hot out. It'll only get hotter as we go, but I can't complain compared to where I know you're located. You got rain and really hot. So, but overall, the summer is upon us. We are in June, and it is official.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it's only going to get hotter. Not really looking forward to it. Going to be staying inside a whole lot more. But let's jump into today's episode. We got a great guest on today. Excited to have him on. I just jumped on his podcast not too long ago and realized we needed to have him on ours. So excited to hear his story and learn from him. So with that being said, Whitney, thanks for joining us, bud.
My pleasure, guys. Great to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. So kick us off a few minutes. Tell everybody who you are, what you're about, and what you do.
Yeah. LifeBridge Capital, obviously multifamily syndicator. They're buying large apartment communities, mostly in the West. And I started in 2009. Actually, I go back a little further than that and say, joined the military in March of 2001. And March is before we were attacked, right? Before we knew we were going to war, but just thought it was the right thing to do. And that really changed my life forever, to say the least. And so found myself all of 2005 in Iraq, and fortunately came home, was able to come home. Unfortunately, not everyone in my squad was able to make it home. But I say the military gave me that never give up mentality that's helped me really become an entrepreneur and to push, in many ways that I may not have otherwise, just being placed in those situations. But I came home and became a police officer. I was hired with Kentucky State Police and also learned a lot there. I had to do a lot of hard things. And so I decided that wasn't what was best for the family. I would have done it for free the first couple of years. I loved working the road, but got married and figured out that, passing my wife the first whole year of marriage in the hallway, just horrible schedule, just wasn't what was best long-term. And we wanted her to be able to stay at home. We had children and making like $35,000 a year, working all the overtime. And, it was going to be difficult to say the least. So that was what pushed me to seeking something else, right? What could supplement my income? I didn't think of it being a full-time business at that time. This was like 2008 and thinking, okay, this is, got to figure out something else, and found out that not like one or two people had built wealth in real estate, but hundreds of thousands, millions of people had built wealth in real estate. It's like, okay, if that many people can do it, I can probably do it too. Fast forward, then within the next year, we bought a couple triplexes and made a ton of mistakes, self-managed, and just learned a lot the hard way. Even in 2009, just made a ton of mistakes, but thankfully didn't quit. And I then became a federal agent, and that moved us to Virginia, where we still live, and did that for about 9 years while still trying to grow the syndication or grow the real estate business. I didn't know anything. I didn't even know syndication existed at that time. Didn't know that was a thing. And so got up to like a 15 unit and really thought I was doing something, but started going to events and realized that, hey, a lot of people, again, were buying 100 unit complexes and had only been in the business a few years, and thought, okay, if they can do it again, I can figure this out. Right. And that pushed me on a big journey. Then I had another business where I was actually training horses professionally, and it was like a whole nother full-time job. And my wife and I decided that it was never going to be passive. And I had built up a brand there and a business and was traveling, doing clinics all over the country. But it was always going to require my time. And so we made the hard decision to sell our farm and to sell everything. So we did. We sold everything and committed to the commercial real estate business. And that's what we did. And that's when the podcast was birthed. And that's when, the commercial side of our real estate business really took off. But I had a lot of learning to do, right? A lot of skill sets to learn, and still do. But we just really, it made me burn those bridges, right? It made me cut all that other stuff off and just focus on this business. And that's what we did.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Can you talk to me a little bit about that commitment period? Because I think there's a lot of people that would probably resonate with the idea of, just going for it and either haven't done it for one reason or another, or want to do it in the near future. And I think, the idea of fully committing or fully selling or fully quitting a job is probably a little scary or intimidating. So I'm just curious what it was like for you.
Yeah, it was a massive commitment, but I knew that's what it was going to take for me to do it. And so riding horses was a passion of mine since I was really little. And so there's probably a lot of people that can relate to some kind of passion you have, maybe playing golf, maybe, doing something else. But at this point, I was doing better at that than I ever had my whole life. I was selling horses for more money than I ever imagined, just doing some amazing stuff. But it was never going to be passive. And it was always going to be like that second full-time job. I would get home from being a federal agent and change as fast as I could, run to the arena, you give lessons and ride numerous horses and be in there till midnight most nights. And so finally, my wife and I were on the beach. We were walking on the beach one fall, and we were just praying and walking and just really thinking about where do we want to be like 3 years from now or 5 years from now? And is this really going to get us there? And so that really helped us to think forward, right? Can we really maintain this forever? No, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to put in that many hours, miss everything with the kids forever. You just can't maintain it. And so we decided we had to make some big changes, and it's like now or never. And I knew that if we stayed on the farm, that I would always have that desire to still be riding, or I'll take that other horse for training, and it would be that distraction, right? I wouldn't be as committed as I needed to be. But another part of that commitment, I think, was my wife as well, being committed, because it was a massive sacrifice for her, selling the farm and really moving into a part of town we didn't want to live in. Bought a little house there. I made a basement in the corner, office in the corner of the basement, and that's where all of it was birthed, and that's where I spent, so many hours. But the level of commitment, it came from her too. And I think our why, our mission behind LifeBridge Capital and why we're doing it helped her as well. Even though she's not in real estate, she's very passionate about our why and our mission, and those things. But the level of commitment, even, obviously doing a daily podcast, I was off every other Monday, so those days of the month, 2 days a month, my team knew that I needed to record 12 to 15 shows those days. And so it would just be back to back to back. We called it like my marathon day, and it would just be nonstop. I would be on other people's shows or take calls or whatever, just kind of madness. My boys knew, unfortunately, like till Saturday night or Sunday, they just didn't see Dad. Like that was when Dad was available. But we had to say no to so many good things as well. But we knew it wasn't forever. Right. We knew it was not going to be forever, but we knew that was a commitment that we had to have at that time.
Mm-hmm. So selfishly, I'm just curious, the everyday podcasts and those marathon days, what's that like? Because we do twice a weekend. We record 2 to 4 a weekend. We're like, okay, this is sometimes a lot. And we're like, we've got a million other things to do. I know your episodes are a little bit shorter, which is, nice and helps with the total time. But what's that been like for you? Because I know that's also been a big part of, your growth and your company and stuff. So can you just talk a little bit about all of that?
Yeah, I was not trying to recreate the wheel, and I thought, okay, I knew other people, or actually one other real estate daily podcast, and obviously have been very successful. I thought, okay, I can make it happen too. And during that time when I was making that decision, I also reached out to tons of other podcasters and said, hey, what's the most difficult thing? How do you do this? And all of them talked about how difficult it was. And the thing they had in common was that they're all doing weekly shows too. And I thought, oh man, maybe I should reconsider this. And I actually also talked to, there's two individuals that I'm sure everybody listening would know. They're very big names in our industry. I was talking to them at this time. I had dinner with them at a conference, separate conferences, and was telling them about the Daily Show. And both of them said, Whitney, you're crazy. Why would you do that? Mm-hmm. And so that really made me question it, right? Should I really do that? Talked to my mentor about it, and he was like, that's why you have to do it. It's too much work. It's like, okay, we'll figure it out, right? We'll push forward. But it's been very difficult, especially working full time, doing deals, trying to maintain investor relationships, all those things, all at the same time, and family. We were actually going through our third adoption process as well. And so we moved twice in the process. So it's just madness, honestly, during that time. But those days, it's really mindset. It's so much mindset. If I told you, Chris, that, or John, okay, and a year from now, you're going to have to run, a marathon, and you haven't done any training up to this point, that may seem very daunting, right? There's no way that I can do that. But if I got, if we got like a month out and I said, oh, guess what? It's only 12 miles instead of 26 and a half. And you've been training, you're going to think, okay, well, this is no problem. Right. So just the mindset of thinking like if that's what it takes, for me, it was just like thinking, okay, if that's what it takes, let's just get it started. Right. But if I know that it's going to be 15 shows, then, when it's 12, I think, okay, it's not that big a deal. Right. Mm-hmm. But it was just the mindset of knowing it's just what I've got to do to keep it going. And really building that team was a crucial point as well. I could not have done it. If I had done a weekly show, I would have tried to have done it all myself, and I probably would have quit and would have been halfway done. But building the team from the very beginning was crucial.
Mm-hmm. So how did you look at it then? Because I think this is something that I'm going through now, even in different areas, but it's kind of compatible of, hey, I want to build this, but I can't do it on my own. So I've got to hire people, and looking at, all right, I'm just going to be, burning money for however long. And you probably don't even know, how did you look at that of like, how many people do I bring in? How much do I pay? What do I spend to get this, massive thing off the ground and kind of running without a lot of my, needing to in the day to day?
Right. And so I ultimately had to think about what tasks need to be completed. We're talking about the podcast versus talking about hiring, say, an executive assistant. There's two very different types of hires, right? And so if it's for the podcast specifically, I'm going to think about what jobs I need done. And if you're thinking about a podcast, you need show notes, you need audio editing, you may need video editing. You may, there's some other little things that you need to be able to find guests. And in my case, finding 30 a month, I mean, that takes a lot of time for somebody, right? A lot of time, especially in the beginning when nobody knows who you are. Nobody really cares about being on your show because you're brand new, right? Or the show's brand new. And so people aren't pursuing you to be on your show. So I had to lay out those specific tasks and then find people that were good at those specific things. And I hired virtual assistants from all over the world. So I had 4 VAs from different countries. Then I had another VA that was in the States that helped me to manage those people. That VA in the States just worked like 3 hours a week, maybe 4 hours in the very beginning. And then finally, I needed her more time than what she could give me. And I had to, go up to the next, level of executive assistant. And we have done that a couple of times as they've run out of time. But I had to find those people who were experts in that task that I needed, very task specific things, and then just lay out the process. This is what I need done first. And so I had an Excel sheet or Google Doc. So, and I would lay out the guest name and show number on the left, the date it was going to go live. And then I would put all the tasks across the top, and they were even color coded by person. Right. So everybody knew, everybody could look at that and see where we're at. And I could look at that, or my main assistant could look at that and see where the whole team is, make sure we're staying ahead of target.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And what, I think another thing that you do, which, even, we changed, for anybody listening, we changed the time on it, and your assistant responded to us like within 5 seconds. I was like, oh, Whitney's on top of it. And then I saw, it was them. integrating those VAs, what's that been like? Because I think that's something that everybody's super interested in, but it's always like, things nobody's really sure of, like, hey, what can I use them for? How effective are they? Or giving up control of like basic things like, your calendar and your email feels a little bit like a lot sometimes. And I'm just curious what it's been like for you.
If you want to scale, you got to give those things up.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't be spending hours a day email, right? Because 90% of them you don't have to see. You may think you need to see them, but you really don't. If you put some processes in place, and I would say, even probably 50% of the things most people do, they don't really have to be the one doing those things. And in the beginning, you think you do, right? Mm-hmm. You think you have to be the one doing those, but you don't. And there is a learning curve. There's a time of that. But hiring, like you're talking about Josie, my assistant that got back to you. Now, she is an executive assistant. She's full-time. She's dedicated to me personally. I mean, maintaining my calendar and emails like one of her top priorities. And so when I hired her, I'd had another assistant that got a better position. She moved on to greener pastures, and I, wish her well, but I needed another assistant. But it's a graduation process, right? And somebody getting started needs to know that your first assistant's not going to be the one that's probably with you the longest, right? You're going to learn a lot. They're going to learn a lot. And you're going to learn how to teach them things, how to get these things started. But you can start with even like 2 hours a week, 4 hours a week. Start writing down things that you do every day. You're going to start to see many things that somebody else could do for you. And so, I mean, you got to get those things off your plate. If you want to scale and you work on those higher dollar tasks, you have to stop doing those lower dollar tasks, but you have to find somebody that can do them. Right. And most likely over time, and not even very long, they're going to do them better than you. Right. Even like getting back to you that fast, Chris, I personally would not have been able to get back to you that fast.
For sure.
Right. But she knows how to do it. We built a system. And so like hiring her, again, it was a graduation process. I didn't start with somebody at this caliber, right? And when I hired her, I had over 800 emails in my important and unread section of my email. Not everything, but just the important and like, these are ones I need to get back to. And that would just like weigh me down thinking about that. Oh my goodness, these investor emails, whatever I need to get back to. And so we set up some systems when I hired her, and within a month, it was probably less than that, honestly, but I'll say a month. I had like 12 to 15 emails in my inbox, and they're categorized, and we categorize them so people know, like she knows there's an approval or action section. There's a viewing only section, and there's even a place for response, thank yous and all responses. So other things I just need to respond to, say thank you, whatever things she knows I need to see. But there's a system there, and we're actually incorporating some other systems around email. But just knowing that, like over time, she gets better and better too. Right? She always responds. If she's responding out of my email, she always says that it's her. I never want there to be any kind of deception there, or even thought of it. But she gets better and better at it. So guess what? That's even less emails that I have to look at, right? She knows it, just like your email. She can take care of that. She's managing my calendar. That relieves so much time and stress from me every day, knowing that those things are taken care of.
I love that. I think that's super cool. It's something I've thought about a lot. What I'm really curious now to hear is how it all ties together and how all this stuff, and I'm sure, many other things, have helped you break into the syndication business and really scale over the past couple of years. Like, what things have been, have you found have been super successful? What things have helped you raise money, find deals, find partners? Like, how has this all helped you?
Yeah. You have to get good at like one or two things to be really good at those things. Mm-hmm. It seems like in the syndication business, and even on our show, I just hear it time and time again. You need to know the whole business to some extent, but you just can't be good at every part of it. And so I focused on obviously the marketing side, investor relations, and being as good at that as I possibly could. And then started building a team for those other things that I didn't have time to be the best underwriter that I knew I needed to be. I didn't have time to build all the broker relationships while also maintaining all the investor relationships and doing the marketing piece and the daily podcast, and still working full-time in the beginning as well, in a full-time family. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to be really good at this thing right here. And then I'm going to build that team that are experts in those other fields, right? And that's what we had to do. So initially for me, it was a podcast. It was connecting with as many people in the business as possible. And the podcast, it's networking on steroids, right? Mm-hmm. It's, how many people can I connect with, and connecting with 7 times as many people per week as most, that are doing a daily podcast, obviously has pushed us forward in a big way. A few things that you talked about raising money, and we've gotten very good at that. And and I try not to ever boast about that, but we are. I mean, we've grown very fast, and I'm very thankful for the investors that desire to partner with us now. I mean, I went from raising 250 million. I'm 250 million. I wish someday, right? 250,000, my first deal, to now filling up, almost $10 million in 3 or 4 hours. And so
Wow.
that's a massive, I know people have been in business for a long time that can't do that. Right. But it took me, I think, being very focused on that one thing. Right. And not, just trying to do everything, myself. And so a couple of things I tell people, though, is when you're having investor calls, when you're talking to people, especially at a conference, I want you to think about how they remember you, right? How is that person remembering you? And what do they remember from your conversation? What sticks out about you? And it's so important that you think through that a little bit, because, when we were all going to conferences and there's 100 to 500 people there, or even if there's 25 people there at a meetup, you have to be different in some way, right? And hopefully a good different. And I didn't plan this in the very beginning, but I did start to see it happen. Was when I would start talking to somebody brand new, they'd never met me before. We would start talking about real estate or talking about business to some extent, or who they are. But I would also talk about my why and my mission and our goal to help families through the adoption process, or to fund their adopting of children. And that. That was such a shock to most people, right? Like, wait a minute, I didn't see that coming. But they see my passion in helping those families. They see a personal side of me that they're not seeing in most people at this, just quick event, right? Or networking. And so we can talk about real estate later, right? I want to build the relationship first. I want to build that connection, because guess what? When I follow up with them a week later, the next day, or a week later, or even a month later, most of them remembered who I was. I started to see that happening. I thought, okay, that like I said, I wasn't planned, but I started to see a way to stand out. But it's really a way just to have a more personal connection, them to see something I'm passionate about. And then we can talk about business and talk about real estate, talk about what asset classes we're buying. Well, all those things that are important as well. But I want them to see who I am first. And that's what I've learned in a big way is investors need to see your character as the operator as somebody they can trust. Otherwise, who cares what kind of deal you have? Right. And so that's what I started to see happening. And now, I have as many investor calls almost weekly as I can possibly take. And so we're trying to even build that part of the business and train other people, to take those calls or to help me, with that. And so that's helped us to grow very fast. There's numerous other things there, but of course that I feel like consistently over time, that's been one of the biggest things.
I love that. And it's pretty interesting to hear that why really separate you out. Cause I think, a lot of people don't use that as a, here's who I am, here's what I do. It's always, I buy this in this area and here's what I have, right? That's kind of like the 3 things you hear about people, but throwing in that why as something that's important to you, I think does make you stand out in a pool of, like you said, hundreds at one single conference in one single area when there's, hundreds of thousands of, real estate, millions of real estate people in the country. So I think that's super interesting. Do you find that when you have these investor calls that why comes up a lot, or is it something that people already know now and it's kind of just like, hey, that's one of the reasons they're even on the phone?
So I would say a big percentage of them, it is one of the reasons they're on the phone. Like they just feel a more personal connection, of something outside of real estate, right? I think it to them, it says more about who I am and my character, things like that, which is what we're all trying to express, right? That we operate with integrity. We're, all these things that we want investors to know. They feel like they already know that to a big extent. Most of them already know about it, but they'll have questions about it as well. And that's been very helpful. I would say also on that phone call, talk about something about the investor, right? One question I like to ask investors is like when they get done with their questions about what markets we're in or what asset classes or whatever, who I am, things. I like to say, what do you like to do for fun? Yeah, I mean, something that simple, right? And something like that tells you something about that individual, tells you what they like to do for fun, tells you just some good information. It also just kind of breaks the conversation up a little bit and allows them to really feel good about talking about something they're passionate about as well. And I've just found that to be helpful also. It seems so simple, right? But you need to do just something like that to break up the conversation, allow them to talk about what they're passionate about.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure too, it's a good way for you to differentiate people in your head too, right? Because if you have the same, you basically have the same conversation every single time with,
right.
Minimal variation. Right. Like you said, they're asking, where do you buy? What do you buy? How do you buy it? What's your typical deal? Like all the things that investors want to know, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm sure breaking that conversation up for you as well, one, makes it a little bit more fun and enjoyable, and two, helps differentiate, like, oh yeah, this guy takes trips to Venezuela with his family, and this guy likes to go kayaking and different things like that. So this girl likes to go to Canada, right? Like whatever different things. I'm sure it helps break that up too, and actually create things you can point back to of like, oh yes, I remember this person.
Well, and even quicker than that, like when they tell you those things, so people want to feel like you have that relationship with them, right? They have that relationship with you as the operator. They want to feel like they're not just some number, right? Mm-hmm. To a big extent. And just that little bit of information allows me to follow up. So immediately I send them an email. Yes, it's a template. We lay out some specific things. I want them to know whatever, but I do edit part of that. That's specific to that person. Right. Mm-hmm. So they saw that they can see that I heard them. Right. And they're, I've edited this, I've made this specifically for them, but also follow up with a thank you card that I'll mention something that they mentioned. I hope, little Johnny's having a great time fishing this weekend or whatever, if that's something that they mentioned. Mm-hmm. And so it's just important that you listen, right, and take notes.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that people don't realize a lot, I forgot who told me it, but it was in a very derogatory way. But it's like you have 2 ears and one mouth, so you should shut up and listen more than you speak. Right. And that I've taken to heart. When you listen and really listen and focus on that component of interaction, you pick up things that most people either glance over or get over. One thing I always ask almost every investor we speak to, a potential investor, why? Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to invest with us, with me? And if we have a deal that doesn't satisfy what you're looking for, then I'm not going to let you invest. And when people hear that, it like their guard is like, wait, what? You're not going to take my money? And I'm like, no, right. Because you're looking for cash flow. It's a vacant property, or you're looking for tremendous upside, and this isn't tremendous upside. So I think that's one thing that I do that people can hear. When you listen and hear what they're looking for and then tell them things like adversarial, quote unquote, maybe that's not the best word, what most people don't, right? Everyone go, give me your money, give me your money, give me your money. When I'm like, oh, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe this is not the right deal. People look at that as a level of, okay, he's hearing me. Now, they might not feel that way when they get on the phone, but when you follow up with them and you say, hey, I remember we spoke and you told me you were looking for consistency and cash flow, blah, 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 here it is. That stuff resonates with people significantly better than 50 IRRs or 30 IRRs, right, or triple your money, right? That stuff, I tell all the time, that's great, right? The returns are fantastic, but there's a level of interaction with an investor that you want to have, so the deal and the investor relation side goes smoother, better, easier. And I think that's extremely important in those reactions. And then you're doing it great just by asking those questions that most people, glaze over or don't even think of asking, because it's always about productivity and business and how much money can I raise and, get people in the pipeline. But there's another level to it that is unspoken.
I feel like most investors are going to be willing to take a little less return to partner with somebody that they just feel good about, right? They feel like you have high integrity. They feel like they were listened to, just like John's saying. I mean, they're going to tend to partner with those people even for a little less return.
Yep.
So as you're doing this right now, are you also finding and underwriting deals and being, the sole, GP in it, or are you mostly co-GPing with other operators that you like?
No, we're doing our own deals. I've not co-GP'd in a long time. So all the deals we've done the last couple of years have been our own projects or our own, our team. And so I personally am not doing all the underwriting. I have a business partner now that's just amazing at structuring deals and underwriting. And so he's really become, our acquisitions director and finding deals. He's in charge of the broker relationships and finding those deals, underwriting them. And then when he finds something that really seems to make sense that we want to pursue, he and I will look at it together. But I mean, he's better at underwriting than I ever thought about being. But that's his. I mean, he loves spreadsheets. He loves numbers, and he's very talented at it, right? And so it's great that he can focus on that, kind of like we were talking about the team, and I can focus still on investors, investor relations, and building that part of the team.
Oh, that's awesome. Because I was going to ask if you still were you planning on, shifting over and doing your own or just niching down on that? So was there any reason, you didn't just niche down on, hey, I market, I raise money for other deals and I partner with other operators in, various parts of the country?
Yeah, I still wanted to be the operator. To some extent, I wanted us to build our own company, and do all that in-house. And I knew by building the team, that had the expertise that we could do that. I was asked to partner early on by many, many people. Obviously, if people start to think you can raise money, people are reaching out. And unfortunately, often it's like, we got a deal and we need to close in 2 weeks. We need you to, I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
I've just spent way too much time and money and energy building those relationships, like we're talking about, to just go throw it away. Right. And rush and try to partner with somebody I don't even know anything about. And so my business partner, Sam Rust, we met at a conference, and a mutual acquaintance introduced us, heard him speak just at a table amongst lots of people a few nights in a row. And my wife, Chelsea, and I had been really praying for a business partner for some time. And like I said, I'd turned a lot of people away. But when I heard him talking, he was obviously very intelligent, had become very good at underwriting and in the syndication business. But he was good at that part of it, but he didn't have the capital, right? He didn't have that part of the business. I could tell we had lots of things in common, but complementary skills. So the last night of the conference, I just approached him and said that we've been praying for a business partner. You seem to fit the bill. However, I'd just like to further the conversation if you're interested. It doesn't mean we're going to partner, but I'd like to get to know you, right? And so we did. And I actually went back and stayed at his house for like 4 or 5 days just to meet him and his family, get to know them better. You'll learn a lot about somebody just seeing how they treat their spouse or how they treat their family, and and spending that time with them. But it was good. It's been really good. And so just that we had so many things alike, but also complementary skill sets have helped us to just move so much faster.
Is there anything, as you went through that process of finding a partner, that you wish you had known before going into it? Like anything you've learned kind of the hard way while going through it, of like growing pains or learning about each other that, would have made the transition easier?
I think that's happened more in previous partnerships, as we've learned different things, as you do, right, through any partnership, and learn more about someone. I think setting expectations in the beginning is pretty important, right? And just what you expect. And that may be by how hard you're working, right? Or just the hours of the day, or when these specific things are going to happen, or even your vision for like 3 years from now or 5 years from now. And it's going to change. But I think those things are very important, that you're just both on the same page. And we have been, as far as Sam and I, but I know in the past, I've been like a 15 unit. I mentioned I was in a partnership with a guy, and he had like 100 single family homes, and he knew I was wanting to get into multifamily. But he was very intimidated by this 15. I don't know why, after all the real estate that he had, but he was intimidated by the 15 unit. He said, let's go do it together. And so we did. And we just didn't discuss enough things up front. We didn't have it in writing. We didn't do enough of that, like figuring out, okay, who's going to do what? How are we managing this thing? And we just did not lay that out very clearly. And so that helped me a lot. Obviously when Sam and I partnered, really think through who's responsible for what, almost like hiring those virtual assistants or an executive assistant. What are the tasks that you're responsible for and I'm responsible for, and thinking that through.
So, me being only 6 months into, going off on my own, one of the things I do think about is, having a partner, not having a partner in the future. And one of the things that always I think about as well, like you said, things change, right? Like I think about how my vision and what I wanted over the past, year, 5 years, 7 years has changed, and having a partner tied to something that I'm trying to build for, 10, 20, 30 years of, okay, what if that person decides to change? That kind of, frightens me a little bit, of like, I don't want to get tied to someone and then have them have a different vision, or I have a different vision. It doesn't align with what we originally thought, right? If it's just me and in 5 years, I'm like, screw this, I don't want investors, I can change. And that's just it. How have you, thought about that? Have you thought about that? And ultimately, why did you still go with the partner?
For sure. No, great question. And if I had, let's say the last partner, if I had given him half of LifeBridge Capital, or if I had, like we had really partnered like that, I feel like I'd be in trouble now. And thankfully we didn't do that then. I didn't even, have LifeBridge Capital or that entity at that time or brand. But I did learn a lot about that through that partnership. Eventually sold my portion of that to him, and we're on great terms, but I learned a lot and I think he learned a lot as well. And we still help each other now, but moving forward, I knew, especially the syndication business, if I didn't find some experts that are really good at these things, I was not going to be able to scale like I wanted to. And ultimately, I don't think we would be near the quality, of an investment firm that we are, because I just wouldn't be able to do it all. And I would not be able to do the underwriting to the level Sam can do it. I would not be able to still maintain all the investor relationship stuff. I just wouldn't, or the asset management or connecting with property management when I needed to, all those things that have to be done. I knew that just like hiring an assistant or hiring virtual assistants, I had to do it. If I was going to scale, I have to hand those things off. And so as a matter of scaling, that person, and one thing that Sam and I did, say the first deal we did together, we knew it was kind of like a trial. We partnered on a deal, but it was, even then it's still deal by deal. Right. We're not like, we kind of are married on those deals, right? Until the deals are exited. But we know that, right? If something major happened, yes, we're going to be partnered on these deals till they exit, but that doesn't mean we have to do more deals together. But we plan to. We have every intention of doing that. That's our vision, of working together long term. But I think initially it's preferring one another over yourself. Some basic stuff, right? The golden rule. Do you really prefer one another over yourself? Or really having the best intentions for the other person and their family. And that's what Sam and I want to ensure that we're doing, even for our employees also. We just want them to know we really care about them. And I think that just goes a long way, but especially with that partnership with Sam, we just remind each other often that, hey, I care about you and your family, and we even get together. Like he lives in Denver, I live in Virginia, but we still trying to get our families together like twice a year. Like no business, just hanging out somewhere, and it's so important, right? It's so important to spend that time together. And he and I are usually looking at deals and we're together more often. But I think that's helpful for us, right? To know we're both still in this. We meet numerous times a week, and have those discussions. But it's almost like that communication level that you need to have with your spouse, right? You need to be communicating and willing to do that. But I knew for me though, Chris, that to scale, I had to find those people that were experts where I was not, or I didn't have time to become the expert. And so that doesn't mean they have to be like a full partner, but you can hire them.
That was the question I was going to follow up with why partner versus not just hire somebody that, why not a, head of acquisitions that is just paid X, right? Like why that?
And I think often that's a great way to do it. However, like in Sam's case, he was already really good at this. And I knew like he was at the level in that part of the business where I was at the over here. Like it was like he's a great visionary as well. Like he has a lot of skill sets that I knew it was worth a partnership. But I would say in most cases, if you're hiring an underwriter, you're hiring somebody like that, or trying to find somebody as a partner, it's a great method to hire them first and say, hey, let's work together for 6 months, and see how this goes, right? Before they're an actual partnership. But I feel like too, when you give somebody like equity, when they are part of the business, it really changes their whole work, just their mindset, right? On being a part of the business and just what they're doing for you.
John, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think, to that point, what is super helpful. Listen, partners are expensive, and I don't mean from giving up an equity perspective. There's a time component too, and there's a peace of mind component. Right. So, what is the worth of, arguments, disagreements, the time, right? You think about that and you're like, well, maybe I hire this guy for $250,000 a year, right? Just I'm throwing out a random number. It's a lot easier to separate with that with a given structure than it was a partnership. Now, the luxury of our business is that our deals are typically, LifeBridge Capital, Tour Real Estate Partners, even your company, and then you own the deal separate. So if the partnership is going in a direction where, maybe the visions change after 6 months, 12 months, 10 years, whatever it is, you can pretty much end the deals as the deals cycle out, refinance. But if there's one that you're going to hold forever, that's a partnership that's going to last. But it's easier to break away. Now in your case, if you're going to bring someone in to help do stuff, I always tell people, find somebody and pay them and see how you operate together. And, I love meeting family, getting together, that's super important because when, I'm a huge Yankee fan, and there's a show called Center Stage, and Michael Kay, who's the host, always asks, if you found yourself in a foxhole and there was one person you want to be with, who is that person, right? It doesn't have to be your business partner. It could be your wife, your kid, your daughter, your son, your best friend from college, whatever it is. But, you got to almost look at that partnership similar. Like, now I'm not talking about you're going to spend the rest of your life with, but when you go into battle, does that guy got your back, or is that guy quick to bail and say, I don't know, I can't do this. So I think asking those questions up front, when you put the gloves on and you go to war, that guy's got to be on the front line with you. And that's more important than anything else, and if that's not the answer you hear, hire and then promote, or hire and give like a vesting interest. There's different structures that you can put out there. And I make that recommendation all the time. Sometimes, even to this date, there are things that I do and I'm like, well, wait a second, it's better off paying for it, because you're going to pay, you either pay for it or you're going to pay for it. So you can go both ways. So, one thing that I think Whitney did well, is if you take your week, right, and you start from when you wake up to when you go to bed on Sunday night, and you write down hour by hour, minute by minute, what you're doing, right? I think the book Clockwork talks about this, right? If you write down everything you do in a week, then you can start assigning tasks. Say, wait a second, this was why'd I do this, right? Let's move this to this bucket. Let's move this to this bucket. And when you find one bucket filling up with very similar things, and if you're not good at it, that's probably someone you hire and see if they add gasoline to the fire, that's like, you step forward and it's like, okay, maybe that's a potential partner, right? And that's how you go through that process that I think is very beneficial before you just say, hey, come on board. I met at a conference. That's nothing wrong with that. But if you really don't put it on paper and have the same visions and align, you're probably just walking into something that's going to be frustrating in the future. At least that's my opinion on that structure. And I think, just from what you're saying here and how you've illustrated bringing on people and hiring and divvying things up and picking the thing that you're great at and knowing it, that's the name of the game, right? That's how you do things different. And when you do things different, you're going to fail a lot, but you'll also come out ahead of the pack and you'll be the best at it.
Couldn't agree more. I love the analogy of the battle buddy, or, also who's going to be in that foxhole with you. Do they have your back? So important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The only thing, I guess, where you said it is easier to split up than other businesses, it's just, like Whitney for you, LifeBridge, and John for you, Toro, there is a brand associated with that. So if you do, dissolve the partnership, does one person keep it? Does the other, does one not keep it, or does neither use it and you've got to rebrand? That part, hurts a little bit, which I guess is something I've always thought about, of like, okay, if you're going to make this company build this brand around the business as well, and then all of a sudden you lose that. Yeah, the deals separate it a little bit easier, right? It's not like you're selling phones or something, right? And you're totally reliant on the money coming into that specific business, but it does hurt from that standpoint a little bit.
Yes. So that's probably the biggest deterrent. And you're right? Once you bring someone in, Toro for me, LifeBridge, when you bring them in, there's either, hey, this isn't working, let's go, I'll keep it, you start, or you make the bet on yourself that every relationship you have is you and not your brand. Now, yes, branding is everything, and that's who people are going to relate with you with. But, you are your brand, right? And if you have a partner, it depends what that interface is. If each person's out there, each person's doing things, how you split things up, well, okay, I'll take this investor, you take that investor, that's where it gets really in the weeds and dicey. But if you're really good at something, to pivot and say, okay, Toro is now going to be John Cohen LLC, I know what comes with it. And I can walk away and say, okay, here, you take that, I'll bet on myself. And at the end of the day, that's, when you break up a partnership, you're betting on yourself being better separate. Now, the legal side of it, that stuff's dicey as hell. And
sure.
Your logo and your branding. If you understand that component, it makes that break a little bit easier, knowing what you're leaving. You have to start from scratch, right? But you are your brand. So your scratch is a lot better than if I picked you up and said, okay, Chris, you're going to go start a cell phone company, right? That's from scratch. You don't know what you're doing. But if I pick you up out of your company and say, okay, I'm going to redo this, it's a lot easier than it may appear. And it's something that, sometimes that might be the reason why you work on the partnership as opposed to separate, because you don't want to rebuild everything again. So it's a give and take for sure. And it's definitely the hardest part of any breakup is just how do you divvy up, the asset or the logo or the brand that you built, how you divvy that up. So it's the biggest question. And that's why I say you either pay for it or you pay for it. Where I say, bring someone in, pay them up very well, and go through the process, as opposed to say, hey, I'm at a point where I'm looking to grow. Do you want to help me do this? And I'll give you X, right? Pay for it first. I personally do.
Yeah, I love that thought. And I would add a little clarity to, like when I said Sam and I partnered, when he and I met and partnered, like that was really at the very beginning, early in my syndication business as well. And so I felt like at that time, he was really bringing as much. I just saw that in him, like he had as much value almost as I did. I just saw that in him. I knew that very quickly, man, he's going to be operating at the same level in his sphere, right? In his thing that he was really good at, he's going to be very good at that and adding as much value as I could. Otherwise, yes, I would have leaned more towards hiring somebody. And even now, obviously, we're looking to hire an asset manager very soon and a marketing director and different people. And we want them to be, very good at what they do, but they will be hired. They won't be, part of the business, of course.
Mm-hmm. I also think to that point, in something that makes a ton of sense, and Chris, from your standpoint, could really help. If there's something, it goes back to what you originally said. If you do something better than anybody, or you think you do it better than everybody, and if you want your partner to come in and do what they do really well, that's an early relationship early on in building a company that works, right? Like if you're rock solid at investor relations, but suck at deal finding, well, you either got to get better at deal finding or you bring someone in with some type of structure, whether it's a straight 50-50 or something, but they run that component of it. And if you stay in your lane and do what you do best and you bring someone in to go with you, as opposed to, veer into each other, that's another partnership that will work for, a period of time. And then you'll see quickly if it's going to work or not, where you say, hey, let's kill this now. But you can structure things like, hey, I'm really good at this. I already have my existing business. I'm going to give you a piece of it, but you're not on, I'm going to give you a piece of it in the terms of like, you're going to get compensated by a deal by deal basis or whatever it is. So instead of them just coming right in and being a partner, you're working collaboratively before, that goes out. But finding people that excel in one thing and putting that team together works really, really, really well. And that's what I believe in. It's just, okay, my brand is me, who I am. Who am I going to battle with? It could be 1, it could be 5, it could be 10. Now, maybe this guy's not a general, he's a soldier or he's a lieutenant, whatever, but we're going into this mission together. And, this might be my partner, but that team is rock solid. And I think that echoes what Whitney was just saying, that, it's a higher position, but it could turn into more.
Right. I think it's interesting, like behind you, Chris, I think I mentioned it when I was interviewing you, is that book, Who Not How, Behind You by Dan Sullivan, a great resource. And one thing he talks about too, I can't remember if it's in that book or a different one, but the things you procrastinate, and he calls it a blessing. Like if you're procrastinating something, put it on a list and give it to somebody else, right? Give it to somebody else that's really good at that thing. So it's like off your plate, anything you're procrastinating. But no, who, not how. I mean, finding the who instead of figuring out how to do everything.
Mm-hmm. No,
exactly.
I love it. And I think that's a great place to wrap up. So Whitney, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I think anybody listening did as well. If people want to check you out, follow you, connect with you, where can they do all that stuff?
lifebridgecapital.com. You can email me, Whitney, at lifebridgecapital.com, or you can call or text 540-5854-338. That's my personal cell phone.
Perfect. Guys, hit them up. Go check out the website, text them. But thank you, everybody, so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you are not already subscribed, it would mean the world to John and I if you would do so. And if you are, please send it to someone that would get a tremendous amount of value from this show. Whitney, once again, thank you for coming on, bud. This was amazing.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.